Well, I'm looking forward to a fantastic program today. In my mind, this is something that humanists should be deeply interested in because I think it gives us a little bit different way to look at how society works and what happens to people who don't fit into the normal path. In a sense, most of us here don't fit in that normal path either. Maybe we identify closely with individuals who physiology is different from the norm and therefore oftentimes leads to serious issues. And our speaker today, Robert Nelson, is going to talk about that. He spent 2 years working in one of Illinois' highest-end treatment facilities for children. He will discuss anger management within the context of conduct disorder and how psychopathology can result from abuse. Please welcome our speaker with a good hand.
Is this microphone working?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to Arthur for inviting me. Thank you to Carl for setting up the mic, all the sound crew, technology people. And again, thank you to everybody who came today. Before I begin, I want to say a brief note about confidentiality because as anybody knows who has worked in social service, we need to protect the identity of the clients that we work with. So in order to do that, I'll be talking very generally. I will be, when I say a statement like I worked with a kid who, you can interpret that to mean that there were probably 3 or 4 other kids that had a similar story also. So that way I'm not revealing anything private about specific people's lives. I won't use any names of clients. If I do use names, it will be false names to protect them even further. And last, I will not make any guarantees as to the 100% truth of the stories I tell. If maybe a kid was banging his head on the window, and I'll say that he was punching himself, okay? Same effect, right? But I might change minute details so that I can protect the clients even further. All right, that being said, I want to say that you're in for a treat today because the reason I came to do this talk is that the 2 years that I spent working at this organization, it really changed me, it transformed me. It's an opportunity that not a lot of people have to work that intimately with this population for that length of a time. Actually, the turnover rate is so high that people who work there usually leave within 6 months because of the stress. So I'm going to be telling stories today. I'm going to be talking through the way that my thought process, my understanding of mental illness changed over those 2 years because there was a big transformation. I came in very naive and I learned a lot. I advanced a lot in my philosophy of humanism. And all of that is what I want to bring to you guys. I want to take you through that whole process that took me 2 years. I'll take you through that in 30 minutes. So we will all be more advanced towards our philosophy of humanism. What I'm going to talk about is what I learned about human nature. It's not going to come from a textbook. I won't be spouting definitions today. It's going to be, real world experiences that I had and the mental sort of turmoil and thought processes that I had to go through to make sense of everything. I'm going to make it as concrete as possible because my belief is that once we can agree on the concrete and what's going on, then we can start to ask questions like how to solve it and what is the cause. So let me ask, has anybody heard of residential treatment before? Raise your hand, please. Okay, has anybody worked in residential treatment or in similar facilities? Okay, a few. All right. So let me briefly explain what residential treatment is. Basically, if you can imagine a young child that has behavior problems that are so severe, they cannot be treated, they cannot stay in their home and go see a psychiatrist and get medications, once a month or even once a week. Their behaviors are so severe that they need to be monitored 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Even while the kids were sleeping, we had staff there, at least 2 staff for about 8 kids. And because their behavior is so severe, aggression could come out at any moment. And we need to be able to keep them safe. Safety is the key. So imagine, this is the facility that I worked at. There are many like it, but imagine a facility, imagine like a small college campus, okay, very, very small, maybe 150 students, so to speak. And a college campus, it has different dorm halls, right? All right, well, those are like, we call them the units. That's where, the clients slept. So you've got 7 or 8 different units on this campus. You've got a dining hall, right? You need somewhere to eat your meals. You've got a school, so you just walk to school for the day, walk back to your unit at the end of the school day. So that's sort of the picture that you should have in your minds. Also, this facility used physical interventions. This means that we use seclusions and restraints. These not mechanical restraints, nothing that would wrap around and restrain you like sometimes at the hospital you use wraps, but manual restraints. So if a client was aggressive and could not be controlled, then a manual restraint would mean 2 staff members take the client, transition onto the floor, and lay on top until the client calms down. That's a restraint, manual restraint. And of course, if you can avoid that, that's great. If you could talk the client down, that's great, but sometimes it's not possible. Seclusions is when, imagine a room, maybe about as big as this stage, and a seclusion room is just an empty room, has tiled floor just like this, nothing in it, and in this room, you would place a client if they were aggressive or maybe self-harming with an object, and then there's a button that you hold to cause the door to lock. There's no key and lock, because then you could lock it and walk away, and that violates their rights. So you need to stand there, hold the button, and there's a window for you to monitor the client and observe as they de-escalate. So let me tell you a few brief stories just to give you this picture. One of my early memories was I was in the cafeteria one time, and there were some kids. The kids that I was working with, we were sitting at our table, and then it was very quiet, normal day, nothing, no arguing, nothing. I couldn't hear anything out of the ordinary. But then all of a sudden, boom! There was this crash, and I looked to my left, and before I could do anything, this was in half a second, I looked over, and as soon as I looked over, 2 clients were already on the ground, staff members on top of each one. One client had taken the plastic lunch tray, smashed it over the other one's head. It cracked, so it cut him in the nose. Blood is pouring out. He's on the ground. Oh, I'm going to get you. I'm going to get you. And so, he couldn't get up because the staff was already doing the manual restraint. The other kid, the aggressor, he was fine. He did what he wanted to do, so he wasn't putting up any resistance. He said, okay, I'm done. Staff members immediately were able to escort him out, because what happens, you remove the target, and then the other kid will calm down faster. So you remove the other kid, and then the aggressor, he was able to calm down, and eventually he could be taken out of the cafeteria as well. I've been told stories by other staff members who were there longer than I was of clients who, one way or another, would get a hold of razor blades, and they would stand in front and just slice. Very severe behaviors. I remember in the cafeteria waiting in line for the food, some of the girls, the teenage girls, would have their lunch trays just walking in line, and I'd look down at their arms and I would see there were scars across from all of their through self-harm behaviors. Staff members have been kicked in the face and needed reconstructive surgery. It was that severe. Staff member was following another client up the stairs. When they got to the top of the stairs, the client had a sock with a can, aerosol can in it, and swung it and hit the staff right in the face. And so when I say severe behaviors, this is what I'm talking about. There are clients, we've discharged clients the same day they discharged. They discharged maybe to a family member, a grandparent, and I'm sorry to say they beat the grandparent with a bat or another weapon and caused death with that weapon the day of discharge. So right now your mind is probably scrambling to make sense of these behaviors. Why would somebody do that? What brings these about? But I do want to show a balanced picture because everybody has multiple sides to them, even these clients. And so I did enjoy working with the clients that I worked with. There were many positive memories. There were times they would draw me pictures and say, thank you for being my staff. And they would color me a picture. We would talk about movies. I remember talking about Batman, about Harry Potter. Just very innocent things. I bring them library books and pass them around. Say, all right, who wants the I Spy book? Or, one time I even read them Plato's Allegory of the Cave. I can't say that they understood it, but I tried. It was fun. And so you can, there are days where you could walk through the campus, maybe in a 5-minute window and everything looks normal. There's no behaviors going on. And you would have no idea. So I do want to get back to this question of, what makes these behaviors come out like that? Because it's very, very abnormal. Abnormal to what we're used to seeing. So right now, let me just zoom out a little bit and give you a little bit background in regards to the system that's in place and sort of the logistical background that I saw. So how would a client get to a place like that? Where did they come from? And there were kind of two tracks that I noticed after a while. One track, not many, it was a small minority of clients would come this way through the school system where, yes, they might be a terror at home, but maybe they had, two parents or strong parents and they could manage in the home okay. Distracted with video games, they're okay. But in the school, they would tear apart the classroom. And so the school systems would be willing to pay hundreds to thousands of dollars to have these kids live at the facility. And it's a cost, it's a cost analysis that the school needs to do, the school district needs to do. So that's one situation. The more common track, though, is that a child will be born to parents, be taken from the parents, maybe in around age 4 or 5, by the Department of Children and Family Services. And why would that happen? Well, I can tell you the number one reason. Let's say you have a 4-year-old child, mother is pregnant with another kid, gives birth to that kid, and the kid tests positive for heroin or cocaine. Immediately, all the kids in that household are taken by the department. So that I saw quite commonly. So once they're taken, then they are set up with a foster home. All right, another loving parent that wants to do something good, and the kids are there, but because of the kid's background, there may have been abuse, there may have been neglect. The kid starts to act out in the foster home. And so in this foster home, they'll start, breaking windows, throwing tantrums all the time. They're very difficult to control. So what happens? They move to another foster home. Maybe this one's specialized. There's special training, that the parent has. But even that parent doesn't have the patience for it. They do have the patience, but the behaviors are just so out of control. How can you prevent some of these behaviors? So then it goes to another foster home, and then finally it ends up in residential treatment. So that's the most common pathway that I saw, is taken from the biological parents into foster care, and then foster care doesn't work out, and they end up in residential treatment. So even though I was able to explain this pathway, okay, there should still be a gap that you feel. You shouldn't be satisfied that I explained why these things happen yet, all right? And so the question I think you should be asking right now, the question that I always like to ask, is what is the mechanism? Okay, well, this one thing happened to them and now they're like this. Okay, that's a before and after, but what's the mechanism? What's the machinery going on that is causing this? And at first, remember I said I was very naive when I went into this, so I thought, okay, they just have anger management problems, chemical imbalance, right? It's very difficult, very quickly, short fuse, so to speak. I said, yeah, they have mood problems, a lot of diagnoses of bipolar, so they might wake up in a bad mood, and this certainly happened. I would be working the overnight shift around 7 or 8 o'clock. Maybe a kid would wake up and just be in a bad mood. No reason that I could think of, and say, I'm leaving. I said, what do you mean you're leaving? Well, I'm going. I don't want to be here anymore. I said, okay, well, where are you going to go? I don't know. They start packing their bags. Move, get out of my way. I said, the program, you need to stay in your room until 9 o'clock. It's a very, very structured program. All right, move. And boom, they start swinging, hitting it, punching me. And so that's, grounds. You don't even have time to redirect them. You have to, if the aggression is so severe, you have to, use the least restrictive intervention, and sometimes that's the manual restraint. So, but is it just a mood problem? Because I said, all right, maybe that explains it. But then there were a lot of situations that couldn't be explained by just this mood or anger problem. And here's an example. What if a client tried to burn down the cottage, burn down the unit, and was angry? And this happened one time where put something in the clothes dryer, the laundry dryer, to try to cause a fire. And the client later said, well, I was angry. I just wanted to kill everybody. Well, is that just an anger problem, or is that something more? What's going on there? So that led to a big debate among me and my coworkers. Healthy debate, I'll say, where there was this notion that perhaps the kids don't have empathy. And my first reaction to that was, oh, no way. I said, no empathy? That doesn't make any sense. I said, extraordinary claims, as they say, require extraordinary evidence, right? I said, you're going to make a statement about the internal experience of somebody else? What's your evidence for that? And I even countered it. I said, okay, if they don't have empathy, why would they draw me pictures and say, thank you for being my staff? I pointed out an example. I said, okay, you remember 2 weeks ago that kid said, you look tired. You've had a long shift, right? I said, doesn't that suggest empathy to you? So we were going back and forth, and trying to make sense of these behaviors. And so I wanted to give them a lot of credit. That's where I was coming from. I had a good upbringing, and I just wanted to see the best in them. So it was very difficult for me to think that way, that they were missing something. It was also difficult because I found myself wanting to excuse their behaviors and say, okay, they have this anger problem, it's not their fault, okay, and sort of minimizing. But then slowly, I mean, here's an example. When I first started, these clients would tell me, oh, so-and-so just gave me the middle finger. I said, him? No, he smiles all the time. He wouldn't do something like that. And, I look over him, and he's always smiling. No problem, compliant. And it took about 3 weeks before I actually caught him, where I looked over, and boom, middle finger, right there to the other clients. And I said, wow, it's really true. I was mistaken. I was humbled. Another time, there was a client. This was in the morning. He was helping his roommate make the bed, and I thought, this is great. Altruism. They're helping each other. I said, I wanted to reward this bonus. You got 25 cents. Gave this kid a bonus for helping the other kid make the bed. All right. Well, a few days later, that older kid ended up trying to make a sexual advance to the other kid, and this was part of the setup. All right. There's a term that we use called grooming, where you will win over, an older client. Sometimes it could be a younger one, but typically an older client can win over the younger one by doing them favors, and then that leads into, other problems. And that, those clients almost always have a history of sexual abuse, being victims of it, and then they just continue that, they perpetrate on other clients. So I went through this sort of disillusionment period where I was sort of seeing these behaviors and realizing, wow, it's not what I thought on the surface. And so I'm trying to make sense and remember this whole debate of the empathy, what's going on in their mind, do they have the feelings for other people? I would come to other examples where, maybe a kid just walking down the sidewalk would stomp on a bug, and not just like an ant, but like a large bug that, you would almost identify as, almost like a pet. It was that large, but then you would stomp on it and just for no reason, it didn't do anything to him. And then there was no remorse either. No remorse. Of course, there were other clients that did show remorse, and they got angry. They said, why would you step on that? It has feelings. So I'm not saying all the clients were like this, but, there was variation, and it depended on what their background was. Serious cases of neglect or abuse, and the kids would end up more, they would be the stompers, Other kids that maybe their abuse was not as severe, they might be the ones saying, why would you step on the bug? But they would also have their explosive tantrums at other times. So that's sort of another example to shed light on this empathy thing. I want to tell you another story that's going to shed light on how these kids work. Because the question that I haven't quite answered yet is how do you react to these behaviors? How do you manage them? All right. As I've been saying, there were a lot of anger management issues going on. So one morning, everybody woke up. It was time to go to the dining hall. Okay, but if you get in a fight at the dining hall, then you're on restriction for 3 days. You can't go to the dining hall because you just got in a fight. So this one kid said, I can go to dining hall, right? I said, you're on restriction. You just got in a fight. All right? Immediately, from 0 to 60, tantrum, throwing stuff. Oh, you never let me go anywhere. Swearing, calling me every name in the book. So all right. Well, you know what the program is. And I knew he knew because he was a sharp kid. So I just, removed the other clients from the room. Again, remove the audience. That's going to help the aggressor calm down faster. So then the aggressor was the only one in the room, and so he's still trashing everything. Takes the railing off of the bunk bed and this is a heavy railing, solid wood, real heavy. He grabs it and he starts, swinging it around. And then, so if he's a danger to himself, then I need to intervene, right, physically. And I'll give him prompts. I'll say, all right, you know your consequences for this, or whatever. He continued, all right, he takes it against the wall. Battering ram, and he's banging the wall. I thought the drywall was gonna break, and I said, okay, all right, when you're ready, I'll take you down for breakfast. Then he walks over to the window, and he has this against the window. I said, all right, I'm not gonna let this happen. So I go up, walk towards him, I say, all right, move back. And he moved back. We had a good relationship, I want to say. This was sort of in the later time that I was there. So he moved back. And I'm just sitting down with my legs up, just waiting. And finally, all of a sudden, as I expected, boom, just sits down on his bed. Okay, I'm ready. And so I brought him down to breakfast, and I said, all right, man, just tell me, you were having this tantrum, and then all of a sudden you sat down on your bed. I said, what? Can you just tell me what was going on in your head? I'm just curious. I just want to know. Well, I got hungry, and I wanted to eat, so I stopped. And I said, oh, all right, cool. And this is a sort of an aside, but it's a funny story. Let me tell you. Does anybody remember a news article this past June here in San Jose? There was a homeless man that climbed up a 9-story crane right by City Hall, and he was up there for 14 hours. The police couldn't get him down. Does anybody remember this? You do? Okay. Homeless man. He climbed the top of this crane, and who knows what he was trying to do up there, okay? He was up there for 14 hours. All right, and they had to call off. They had to stop the construction. Everything. The construction company was angry. They lost, thousands of dollars that day. All right. Do you know what the headline to that article was? Let me read it. After 14 hours atop a 9-story crane, homeless man climbs down for a burrito. That's how they got him down. All right. So it's not, oh, please come down. People need to work. All right. It's not, please stop banging the wall like that, And note, when I asked that kid, I said, why did you stop? He didn't say something like, I knew you were working overtime, staying here to keep me safe. So I felt bad. I wanted to, stop my behavior so that you could go home. You looked very tired. No, that's not the reason. The reason is that he was hungry and he wanted to get what he wanted. So it's funny that you start, after you work in this field, you start to see these examples all over, in the news and everything. So you should by now be starting to get a picture of how their minds work, and it's about getting caught, and it's about the consequences, and it's about what's in it for me. How does this relate to me? There's, again, going on with this theme of the empathy. With all of the turnover in staff, you'd think. You would think that when a staff member quits, it's very hard for the staff members to quit because they like the kids, they develop a bond, and because that's normal, all right, for the human species, we create this relational bond. It's difficult to leave that work, but it's not the same for the kids, and it's quite surprising. And it took me a year or two to actually realize this. But when staff members would quit, you get the same reaction every time, sort of like this blank stare. They're saying, oh no, don't quit, I like you, don't, It's more of like this blank stare, and then they'll ask one question. Well, then who's gonna drive me to McDonald's when I make level 2? And so then it comes right back to what's in it for me. Okay? So and then here's an example of, one of my coworkers, she's very educated in this field, did master's degree and studied this, specialized in sort of this forensic stuff. She gave an example. She said in her graduate program, the professors had them watch a film called The Iceman about a contract killer named Richard Kuklinski, who reportedly, he said he murdered over 100 people. And at the end of this movie, the reason that the professor showed it is that he's crying. And at first you might think that he's crying because he feels bad for the clients that he murdered or that he harmed. What's really going on is he's crying because he got caught. And he's now behind bars. And that is sort of the perspective that, that I'm trying to get at here. And it was difficult for me to arrive at this because, like I said, I wanted to see the best in the kids, and I wasn't used to thinking this way. It was a different way of thinking. But there's this, and again, not all the kids were like this. It depends on their background, but there were some kids that were very much this way. So this leads to the question and the answer of how do you manage their behaviors. So as you might imagine, it doesn't work to plead with them. Just, oh, please stop, please stop. No, it never works, never. Appeals to feelings will not work. Don't you think it's harming? Don't you think it's harming him? Or don't you think I'm tired of this? And it's funny because as parents we say this a lot. Can't you see I'm tired of this? It doesn't work. What works is what's getting results the most is consistent consequences, and it's a very structured program that we had, and that's probably saved my life, at this facility. So if there's, a client that's starting to, yell or tantrum, let's say, okay, that's your redirect. That's step one. All right, if they continue, boom, there's a fine. All right, 25 cents. You just lost 25 cents. That's your fine. If you continue, that will be a rule violation. They continue, all right, there's your rule violation. And it's consistent the same way every time. And kids were responsive to this. It was very structured, and there were rewards. If you got a rule violation, there was privilege loss. No TV for a certain amount of time, early bedtime, etc. Okay, so, and there's a whole program where level system, you have to make, in order to make level 2, you need to have very few rule violations. And so I've seen this work. I've seen kids stop behaviors and tantrums like that cold turkey. And it's very surprising because, like I said, they've got these anger issues, it's they can't help it. But then I saw many situations where they could help it, where they would be getting in fights, every other day. And then what happens? Okay, well, we have an off-campus trip to the museum coming up. In order to go to this trip, no rule violations in 7 days. And you would, just like magic, you would have no rule violations in 7 days. That's only if they're motivated by it. Because if they don't really want it, if they don't want that burrito, so to speak, if they don't care about the museum, then it's not worth it. I've had kids say, I want to behave, it's just it's so hard. I'm trying. And so the reward really has to be meaningful to them. It has to be worth it in order for them to, for this to really work. I want to tell one more story to sort of shed some light on again, this concept of reward and punishment. So on some of the overnight shifts, one time I started, this client would wake up at maybe 5 in the morning. I don't know why. And he would wake up in a bad mood and start saying, I'm gonna wake up the cottage. I said, oh really? Yeah. Start screaming. And everybody is starting to wake up. I said, oh great. Last thing you want is, another 10 or 11, behaviorally challenged children at 5 in the morning. So I said, all right, come on, you're in timeout, go downstairs with me, okay? And he came right downstairs, and I thought, oh, this is great. I solved the problem. You can't disturb them upstairs, they can sleep. All right, but then he started to run around the living room, Oh, great. I said, all right, you need to sit down. That's your warning. If you continue, that's your fine. Boom, that's your fine. That's your violation if you continue. And then that wasn't working, okay? Because he didn't care about that. At this point, he had lost a lot of hope with his situation. So it wasn't working. And so I would be down there for hours, just trying to think up anything that I could. It wasn't working. And then another staff member would come in and say, oh, this kid has been, running circles around me for 2 hours. And the staff sat down. This was a veteran staff. He's been there 5 years. I had huge respect for him. Calmest guy I ever knew. And he came in and said, all right, that's not going to happen anymore. Sat down, and the kid went over to the rug, sat down. No behaviors. I said, oh my God. I said, how did you do that? And it had to do with, what the kid could get. Well, let me explain how I stopped it, and then that will show, why that worked. So this happened maybe two or three nights in a row until I could finally came up with something. I said, okay, this kid's having too much fun downstairs running around. I think that's the reward that he's getting. I said, I need to stop taking him down there. So sure enough, the next morning, wakes up at 5 a.m. I'm gonna wake up the cottage. I said, go right ahead. I'm not bringing you downstairs. We're not doing that anymore. And then he looked at me. And he stopped. He stopped right then and there. And so that's when I realized that was a reward for him to go downstairs and have the one-on-one attention. That was a reward. That was not a punishment. Being told time out. That was not a punishment for him. He liked it. So again, this is not about how I feel. It's not about do I want to stress out the staff, or do I want I don't want to make the staff feel bad. It's not about that. It's about what am I getting? Do I get playtime, or do I have to stay in my bed? So let's zoom out a little bit. I'm going to try to wrap this up in 5 minutes so we can do a question and answer session. I'm sure one of the questions that's in your mind is, are these kids born with it, or is it environmental? This whole nature-nurture debate. All right, I don't want to get too bogged down in, correlation, causation, anything like that. Okay, we can't do experiments. We can all agree on that. We're not going to take kids randomly, divide them into groups and abuse one group and then not abuse the other and see what happens. No, we're not going to do that. So we need to look at factors, and we need to look at, what are some of the patterns that we see. I already told you about some of the patterns. We can talk in terms of factors and predictors. Do this. Why don't you go home, Google psychopathy, Google conduct disorder, serial killers. Go to Wikipedia, look up the serial killers that you know by memory, and read their backgrounds, and you'll see. John Wayne Gacy, beaten by his father, molested by a family friend. Richard Kuklinski, the Iceman I was talking about. The Wikipedia said he was constantly abused by his parents, especially his father, who beat him heavily. I mean, you can start to see patterns. So let's not get bogged down too much on the causes and these factors. Let's focus on the solutions. All right, let's get creative about the solutions, because problems are glamorous. It's movies. Problems will sell movies, all this bad stuff, all right? And it grabs our attention. That's how the news works. But what about the solutions? So let's focus on the solutions. Let's put our minds together. Let's have a good forum today on what we can actually do, how we can use this information to build a better society, to build the ideal world that we want to live in. Because as humanists, it's up to us to understand these problems and to solve them. So in the past couple of years, I've gotten more into systems thinking. So let's present this, okay? So we already have systems in place to solve these. So let's look at what they are and see if they need to be fixed or if there's something missing. All right, so one system is the mandated reporter system, okay? And this seems to be working because there were a few kids that came into us because their teacher made a hotline call when the kid came into their classroom with bruises or telling them, oh, I know how to make methamphetamine, okay? Immediate hotline call, and then the kid is, there's an investigation. The only problem with that is what happens before, how can you prevent it before it happens? That's a good system for catching, for detecting it, but how can we stop it before it even happens? Another part of the system I want to present is, all right, here's some common patterns. Remember I said that pathway of, the mother gives birth to a child that tests positive, so all the kids are taken. All right, what happens after that? The court says, parent, you need to do drug treatment courses, you need to do parenting class, and then, we can talk about reuniting the family. All right? There were cases I saw where the parents did the drug treatment class, did parenting class, went back to school, turned their lives around, and got reunited. That's a success story. So part of that is working, okay? But there were also parents that didn't go to their drug treatment class, they didn't do their parenting class, and then the kid gains control of their behaviors, they learn coping skills, coping thoughts, and they're ready to leave, but the parent is not ready. The parent still has work to do. So then what do we do in that case? Just send them to another foster home? Well, so that's something we can talk about. I do want to mention Arthur Jackson's book, How to Live the Good Life. There was a principle in there that caught my attention. Principle 10 out of 11, his ways of wisdom. And it says, give every child a nurturing home. So I think that's very relevant after hearing this talk today. So, right on time. I'm going to end with a quote, so to speak, a last thought that I have. So I know that this is heavy stuff. It's difficult for me emotionally to get through those 2 years, and like I said, many people don't last that long. And it can depress you. This stuff can get you down. But here's the way that I look at it, okay? The job of every human being is to fully transition from child to adult, to take full responsibility for addressing the atrocities and the tragedies that happen in this world, whether it's drug addiction, poverty, mental illness, etc. While at the same time preserving the playfulness, enthusiasm, and genuine curiosity of the child. So this dialectic of the child and the adult, it's difficult to bridge, but the way I see it is that the world needs you to grow up and solve its problems just as much as it needs you to keep smiling the innocent smiles that you gave the world when you were a kid. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to keep track of the order in which hands go up and wait until I bring the mic to you. Please don't talk if you don't have the mic.
Hi, I'm Fran Naylor,
My friend.
and I have a lot of experience in this field. I'm a retired public health nurse, and I'm also an emeritus member of the Child Abuse Council currently. And we have a website which is really good. And on that website, there's a lot of information about the effects of child abuse. And I've also been I was actually a child abuse program coordinator for public health. And I ran a multidisciplinary child abuse team and was also the coordinator of the child death review team. One of the problems that I see is that we have decreased services. In public health, when I started long time ago, we had a lot of money for maternal and child health. And at this time, there's basically very little that's being done. Public health nurses now are pretty much involved with tuberculosis control, communicable disease control. And they do some maternal and child health if it's connected with getting money. But just going out and helping people isn't really happening. So we just need a lot more money into services. And there's a definite relationship between domestic violence, drug use, and all kinds of stuff. So that's it.
Yeah, thank you for those resources.
Thank you. I was just wondering what made you finally decide to quit that job? And then I'm wondering where you went from there. And maybe if you're not still there, where you are now. Your follow up on
Yeah.
that.
Where does this go? So, while I left there, I wanted to come to California for personal growth. And it was a hard decision because, like I said, it's always hard to leave the clients. But I had to do this for myself because the more that you can work on yourself, the more you give to other people. So I came out to California, and now I'm working at a nonprofit here with adults this time, and adults with not these, not so much the conduct disorder or the aggression. There is some of that, but most of the adults I work with have schizophrenia, and I could talk more about that after the Q&A.
I'd like to ask for some more information about your background, your training, your experience before you took the job that you've been talking about.
Sure.
I don't have any context to put you in.
Right. Okay, so I went to college in the suburb of Chicago, and I started out in computer science, but I ended up going with psychology and Spanish. Right after that, I worked for 2 years. That was after I got my bachelor's. Worked for 2 years for the state of Illinois, visiting different high schools, trying to help low-income students find their way to college, find ways to pay for college. So I did that. After that, I took a few nursing classes to explore that. Stuck around and just took some philosophy classes for pleasure. This was at a community college. And then had to go back to the workforce, so started working at the facility that I just talked about. Over here.
I just want to,
Hi, Rick.
hi. I just want to say that, how do people get this way? It's very difficult. There are many ways.
Yeah. I do want to say Rick is a clinical psychologist, right?
Yeah. But one very, very important piece of my history when I was a child, and I use this piece of philosophy in my treatment of patients. I ran a psychiatric unit in New York, and in dealing as much as I can with people when I'm in control of myself. And that is, one day my father told my mother, "You must respect the children." In our society, very often you'll see people say, "Oh, you've got to respect me," the head of the family and all of that. But he said, "No, you must respect the children." We had enormous respect for my father. And just think of it, we knew he loved us. He wasn't very demonstrative because he was shy. But we knew he loved us. And respecting us, we had rights. We had ideas. He respected them. They may be wrong, or maybe, and sometimes they were different from his. If it was knowledgeable, he would know. He would help us with it. But if it was a good idea, he would take it, or he would teach us, But that idea, think of it. Most people think, oh, they're going to discipline a child and this and that. Respect them. And along with love, it's an enormous power that you have.
I'm losing a little track of who was next, so I'm going to take the person that raised her hand last. Please raise your hand again if I missed you.
I have some experience with that because I adopted a girl who was 3 and had been through living with drug-addicted parents and all the horrors that go along with that. And I got her at 3. By the time she was a teenager, it was really bad. I mean, there was a lot of acting out, and she ended up in a multidisciplinary program, psychological and drug and everything, for 2 years, which did help her quite a bit. And it's closed down now. Unfortunately, it was for adolescent girls. And they had meetings every night where they would sort of tear people apart and tell them what was wrong. But they also gave them tools to use to deal with their issues. And she came out of it with a lot of help, you know, from being there. So now it's closed down. They don't have the money for it anymore. It was part of Walton House. So, you know, these kids, and she still is friendly with one girl that was her roommate and who's now doing fine. These kids can be helped. You know, the other girl that she's friends with came from a really bad drug family also, but she's doing okay now. So I think what this lady said, you know, we need funding to help these people because they've gone through hell, a lot of them. Also, I heard that in prison, a lot of the criminals in prison have brain injuries. They were hit in the head at some point. And I don't know if that happened. If kids are being abused, they could be hit in the head too, or have just an accident or something. But that, you know, brains are delicate things, you know, so that could be a factor too.
Definitely. We had to watch the head banging behaviors because if there was already damage, it could get a lot worse.
First of all, thank you so much. Great presentation.
Thank you.
My question is, there are a number of these cases where people are violent or people are destructive kind of through no fault of their own. Someone here had mentioned, like, some people might have a mental disorder or something like that that makes them act out violently. How did you find a way to not take it personally when these guys would go, because I mean, I worked in a domestic violence shelter and it was a similar problem of how do you not take it personally when people are violent and destructive towards you, when you know it's not really towards you. But.
Sure. I'll give you the answer to that. Have you ever been driving on the road, somebody cuts you off, right? You immediately get angry. Oh, I can't believe that. How could they not see me? You know, they just cut me off. Okay, then what happens? They turn right into the emergency lane for the hospital. And you think, oh, all right, that, you know, I'm okay with that. Well, same thing with the kids, all right? They're cussing you out, they're hitting, throwing their tantrums, disrespecting you, you're a horrible staff, this, that, okay? The key that allowed me to tolerate that was my thinking. I said, okay, well, what did they go through that's causing them to do this? Okay, what kind of background do they have? And that sort of thinking allowed me to calm down and not take it personally and sort of dissociate a little bit, you know, and see, okay, this is going on. Maybe get more in my left brain. I don't know how to explain it exactly, but yeah, it sort of distances you a little bit to go into analytical mode instead of emotional, you know, oh my God, I can't believe they said that to me.
Is it fair to say that you look at it like a broken robot? Like the coding is wrong somewhere there, but it's not its fault that it acted that way?
Right. So you said, do I look at it like a broken robot, like mechanically? Yeah, in a certain way. I mean, you just get curious. I mean, instead of reacting, just get curious and be like, oh, why? That's interesting. Why is that going on? You know, why are they saying that? And a lot of times, I mean, even in your everyday life, you can find examples where somebody says something to you that offends you, and you later down the road realize it says more about them than it does about you. Question?
Is it hard to distinguish between the child who acts out physically because he or she was abused and has nowhere else to turn or need in order to take that out on somebody, and those who actually were physically or mentally affected by the beating.
My thought is that those two kind of like are intertwined, because when you go through that experience, the abuse, it does alter your brain. I mean, everything. Our brain is always changing. So that experience will change your thought patterns and your thresholds and everything. That's how I understand it. And then, so it's sort of hard to separate the factors sometimes. Question?
Yes, hi. You mentioned many of these young people come from a background of substance use by their parents. I'm guessing that many of the young people themselves have substance use issues. I'd like to know what support or treatment models are available or made available. What choices do they have?
Well, drug use in the facilities was kind of rare because it's such a closely supervised setting that they don't have the opportunity to use those things. I worked with the younger end of the population, about 10 years old, so a lot of them didn't have those substance issues. The teenagers did, for sure. We referred them to some substance abuse programs, but yeah, unfortunately, I didn't work directly with them a whole lot, so I can't give you any more details. Other than that, I do remember a substance abuse counselor visiting campus regularly to do meetings with those clients. Yeah.
These kids were at a pretty low level of moral development. It's been too long since the psychology course history remember those terms, but and it seemed to me that the responses that you were making to them were, you just recognized where they were and you responded at that level. What were how did you influence them, teach them, mold them, help them to improve, to sort of move up the scale of understanding how to relate to other people?
That's a good question. How did what did I do to help them develop sort of maybe some sense of empathy or relating to other people? You can teach them manners for sure. Please and thank you and excuse me, social customs, but there's a big question there underlying what you asked, which is, can the kids develop a sense of empathy? Is that lost permanently due to the abuse, or can that be recovered? I had a lot of colleagues who would say it's permanently lost. And these are people who have studied forensic psychology and studied, serial killers, psychopaths. So that's one of my thoughts, is that there's probably a limit to that. But again, like I said, not every client was that typology. There were other clients that were there for mood disorders, and they didn't quite have that relational component missing from them. They did have some degree of empathy. They just had very significant mood swings that would lead them to aggression. So there's different flavors, different types of this. Yes.
Well, my question is related with what you just said, no? Do you try in this institution to do a correct psychiatric diagnosis and use some medication, drug treatment that they need,
Oh, yes. Yeah, sorry, is that the question? Yeah, we definitely used medication, and that's I mean, think about it. They're already seeing a psychiatrist. They're already on 4 or 5 medications, and they're still exhibiting the behaviors that I talked about. Because if they could manage their behavior, if the medications alone were enough, then they would be an outpatient. They would still be at home. Their behaviors would be managed. They would be seeing a psychiatrist every week or every month to make sure that their meds are working, that they have the refills, etc. Okay, but these situations were so severe that even with medication, they still needed to be monitored 24 hours a day by professional staff.
I want only to add to that psychiatric diagnoses are very difficult to make correctly, and this patient go to years of misdiagnosis, and until finally they got the right diagnosis and the right treatment, and everything changes completely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the psychiatrists play a huge role in the picture. Correct diagnosis is very important.
I didn't see any other hands. I had one question I wanted to ask you about. Over time, there used to be this phenomenon called using tough love. And I don't know where you stand on. I'm just interested myself because I haven't heard anybody talk about it recently, and apparently it doesn't work very well. I'm not sure.
Can you give me an example?
I can't. Just
I don't recall the tough love very
Does
much.
anybody recall it? Okay. Martha.
Well, basic tough love is based on the Christian principle that if people do the wrong thing, you punish them somehow, not necessarily with a whip, but like somewhat along the lines you talked about. Okay, you won't be able to go to the museum or that kind of thing. But the idea of it is consistency in not letting the child, let's say, get away with stuff. In other words, if they have a behavior that's not acceptable in the home, to take away any rewards that they would want to have. That didn't work well with my child. He decided, I don't need your rewards, so I'll just keep doing what I want to do.
Right. And one more.
When I was going through things, I went to some tough love meetings. And I remember one thing they said, do not kick your child out. We used to recommend that, but the streets are far too dangerous. Don't kick your kid out in the street. Whatever you do, don't throw them out to the wolves.
So the response I have to this tough love question is that limit setting is very important. If you don't set limits, they'll walk all over you. And you see this with the new staff that come in and maybe they're not familiar with the program and how to issue the rule violations, and they end up just pleading. That's very natural. Oh, stop that, stop, or indefinite redirection. Okay, stop that. No, stop. I said that. I said, how many times do I have to say? All right? But no, you should just do the 3 and be done with it. Issue the rule violation if it's the 3rd time, and then you're done. The limit setting is important. You don't need to be angry about it. And that's part of the reason it works, is because you avoid the power struggles. You can easily get into power struggles with the kids by saying, oh, why did you do that? You shouldn't have done that. But then you're invested. And when you get invested in the kid's behavior, their control sensitivity makes them want to do it again. Sort of in that example I was talking about, the yelling in the morning. But so it's not personal. You don't show investment. You just say, okay, this is the program. I said this is your redirection. Okay, no, this is your fine. And if you continue, that's the program. It's not me. It's these are the rules that all apply to all of us. And because the more investment you show, then it's not going to be good for you.
If I understood, many, if not most, are social service takeouts from families, drug addicts, things like that.
Could you repeat that?
The way the kids enter the system, you said a large proportion were a heroin mother, and then social services comes in and takes the kid.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I have 2 questions. you know, I'm sure there's situations where that's appropriate. However, if you were taking from your natural parents in potentially a loving but not perfect situation, put into a foster care system where there are many people that are in it just for the money and they bounce kids around, and then put into what sounds like a controlled environment or almost a kid prison, wouldn't you be angry? Second question, what happens to these kids when they get to be 18, 21, whatever it is?
All right. When they get to be older, ideally they'll transition to some type of independent living, transitional housing, and live on their own. And there were success stories with some of the kids where they would hold down a job on their own. They would even have kids of their own, and they would make a phone call back to the facility and say, "Oh, thank you for helping me. 10 years ago, I'm holding down a job. I have my own apartment." And so there were certainly success stories. In regards to your first question, that leads to an even better question, which is, how can we preserve the family? How can we keep loving families together while keeping them safe? That's why I wanted to direct us towards the solutions. What can we do? And I'm thinking even before it happens, because we need to do something after we find out, whoa, there's some serious abuse going on. But what can we do to make sure that doesn't even happen in the first place? So I think we should be asking. Tony Robbins says the quality of your life is determined by the quality of the questions that you ask. So, thank you. Yeah, back there.
Well, I was going to ask on a similar kind of thing about the family involvement and whether the goal is to reintegrate them with their family. My daughter does similar or did similar work to what you're doing in Chicago, but now she's a social worker working with adults because she just burned out on about 3 years of doing that. They had a lot of children with autism, which complicated it as well. And most of them lived in a group home setting. They were transported to where they would be with her during the day. She was, kind of their teacher, and then transported back. But a lot of these kids did still have some involvement with the family. Some would go home on the weekends, that kind of thing. Are the parents able to visit them, or is there a way that bridges to have the ultimate goal that they would maybe move? I mean, I also I'm familiar with an organization here, EMQ Families First, and I work at a thrift shop. I volunteer at a thrift shop that raises money, but I'm also familiar with a lot of their social workers. And in that situation, they try to keep the children in the home and work with the whole family unit. But we do, they do have a crisis center and things like that they use. But so how often were these kids actually reintegrated back into their?
Good question. Yeah, I'll give you 3 different common pathways or situations that I remember. Okay, 1, if they're being funded by the school system, most likely they can go back to their parents. Their parents, love them. Their parents just can't manage their behaviors. And what's interesting, I do want to point this out. I don't know, how you want to interpret this, but all of the school-funded kids that I remember, they were not living with their bio parents. It was always they were living with like a grandparent because their bio parents had some issues with abusing the kids or using drugs, and so then the kids, instead of going to foster home, went to the grandparent who was taking care of them. But I mean, how is a grandparent going to keep a child safe when they're breaking windows and things like that? That's one situation. The other one, okay, if they are from the Department of Children and Family Services, so if they were removed from the household, then there are 2 options. Okay, if the goal is return home, if that's what the goal is from the department, then yes, they do home visits and there's an attempt to reintegrate. Okay, other situation, if parental rights were terminated because just the abuse was so bad, or the parents maybe gave up their rights voluntarily, then there is no hope of that reintegration, and so it goes to foster care, and so we start to try to do visits with the potential foster families and see if that's a good match, and do those weekend visits with the foster family.
Okay, there's only going to be 2 more questions, and you're 3, so you're not going to get a chance. And then we're going to stop, because we said we were going to stop. Allow a little time for
we're
everyone.
a little bit over
So
time,
a
but
lot
we
of
can
people
talk.
while we set up.
Okay, I was hoping to wrap it up, but in any case, wanted to remind people that next week, set your clocks back an hour. Or bring something to do while you're waiting for the rest of us. And I'll let the last person have a question before I close it.
Didn't anybody ever hug anybody at that place? I'm still concerned about this nurturing children.
Right.
Because these are really children that you're talking about here. Some of them may have been 12 or 14 years old or 6 years old, but they were really all behaviorally, psychologically, they were children. I think the tough love thing never works. It may keep them, you have to do things to keep a child from injuring themselves, and you do what's necessary to keep them from doing something that's going to be lethal. But I got lots of whippings when I was a kid because my younger brother and I insisted, it was a small town, open country. Country kids go swim in the river. It's kind of dangerous. I got lots of whippings for going to the river. Never deterred me a bit. What did was finally my dad would sit down and talk and listen. More important, listen. And then when he got me to making commitments that I wouldn't go to the river, then I was stuck. And it seems to me, absent that kind of, respecting the child, and okay, what's the motivation here? Otherwise, it just doesn't happen. And maybe later the opportunity to talk with you more about, was there no talk therapy? Did anybody ever comfort anyone?
Right.
Because that other disciplinary stuff seems to me just postpones the problem and maybe exacerbates it.
Right, all very good points. Yeah, I'd like to talk more afterwards. To answer just a few of them, yes, there was talk therapy, 1 hour a week for each kid. And in regards to, sort of the nurturing component, I agree. It's no place for a kid to grow up. It'd be much better to have them in a family loving home, and so you need to figure out how we can do that. As for showing affection at facilities like that, we need to balance that with professional boundaries. It's a discussion unto itself. But yeah, it's very good points.
Thank you, Robert.